My name is Lila Moore, and I never imagined that desperation would lead me to a mansion overlooking the sea, a place where silence was louder than storms. I was just a girl searching for a job to survive, but instead, I found a broken man imprisoned in his own home and a wife who wore cruelty like perfume. What began as caretaking became something deeper, a fight to save a life that was slowly fading. But I didn't know that helping him would uncover secrets powerful enough to shatter everything. Where are you watching from? Don't forget to subscribe for more stories. The sky above Harborview carried the heavy gray of early winter, a muted shade that made the sea and the clouds blend into one endless sheet of dull silver. A thin mist moved through the narrow streets, settling quietly on rusted railings and cracked sidewalks. Up a worn staircase above an aging laundromat, in a small room with peeling wallpaper and a single flickering bulb, sat Lila Moore, hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long since gone cold. At 17, she had already learned the way grief reshapes a life, hollowing out the spaces that once felt safe. Her mother had died months earlier, leaving behind nothing but a few worn belongings and a debt large enough to drown them both. The little apartment smelled faintly of damp plaster, detergent from the laundromat below, and the tired desperation of someone who had stretched every dollar until it frayed. The landlady had visited that morning, arms crossed and tone firm, telling Lila what she already knew: rent was due and patience was gone. She had nodded silently, too exhausted to offer excuses. Each evening followed the same pattern: boil cheap noodles, count coins, and scan the classifieds printed on thin gray paper. She circled every job that didn't require experience, education, or luck. 3 things she didn't have: dishwasher needed, position filled; cashier, must be 18; caretaker, full-time with no lodging. Her voice had gone hoarse from calling, from hearing the same rehearsed rejections. She was about to fold the paper away when she saw it: a small advertisement printed in a black box near the bottom of the page. Caregiver needed, private residence, meals and room included, no experience required. It felt too perfect, almost suspiciously so, but desperation quieted caution. She picked up her cracked phone and dialed. The call was answered immediately. A woman's voice, crisp and steady. "This is Mrs. Rowan." Lila swallowed and explained why she was calling. There was no small talk, no interview questions, only a brief pause before the woman replied: "If you are able to start, be at 91 Cliffside Lane tomorrow morning at 10. And the line went dead. No details, no instructions, no confirmation. Yet Lila felt her heart race, a fragile flare of hope rising inside her. She packed her belongings slowly, methodically. One change of clothes, a comb with missing teeth, and a folded photograph of her mother smiling at the camera. The photograph was frayed at the edges as though the years had tried to erase it. Lila traced her mother's face with her thumb before tucking it inside her bag. She whispered, almost to the empty room, "I'm trying." The next morning, the bus arrived late. The driver counted her coins, grimaced, and said she was short. She stood frozen, humiliation burning beneath her skin, until the driver's shoulders softened just slightly. "Go on." "It's cold," he muttered, waving her through. She thanked him under her breath and moved to the seat by the window. The city slowly faded the farther they rode from the laundromats, corner shops, and people carrying plastic bags through puddles. The coastline began to reveal itself: jagged cliffs rising above the waves, dark pines bending toward the wind, the ocean a restless expanse of gray-blue. Then she saw the house. 91 Cliffside Lane was not merely a house, but a statement made of glass, stone, and silence. It stood above the ocean like it had been carved from the cliff rather than built on it. Broad windows faced the shore, reflecting the waves. A balcony stretched along the upper floor, its glass railing clear enough to nearly disappear. A long drive led up to the entrance, where pale stone had been laid in neat geometric lines. The air smelled of salt and something clean, almost surgical. Lila hesitated only a moment before stepping forward. Before she could lift her hand to knock, the door opened. A woman stood framed there, tall, elegant, composed in a way that suggested every detail had been chosen with deliberate precision. Her hair was pinned neatly, her blouse smooth and pale, her posture unshakably controlled. Her eyes flicked across Lila. Shoes, jacket, hair, face, with the ease of someone who had judged many people before. "You must be Lila," the woman said, not in question but in confirmation. Lila nodded. "Yes. Are you Mrs. Rowan?" "Serena," she corrected. Her voice was cool without being unkind, distant without being rude. She did not invite Lila in with words. She simply turned, expecting her to follow. The inside of the house was quiet and bright, with pale flooring that softened each step and glass walls that framed the ocean like a restless painting. The scent of eucalyptus and something faintly sterile hung in the air. Serena spoke as they walked, her tone smooth and practiced. "You will be assisting my husband, Dr. Daniel Rowan. He was a highly regarded cardiovascular surgeon. A brilliant one once. His health has changed. You will tend to basic care. Meals, companionship, daily tasks. I assume you can manage that." It was not a question. They entered a room overlooking the sea. A man sat by the window in a wheelchair, back straight, eyes distant. His hair was streaked with early gray. His hands rested still in his lap, fingers unmoving. The quiet around him felt thick, as though sound itself hesitated. Serena's tone did not change. "Daniel, this is the girl who will be assisting you." He blinked at the window, slowly turning his gaze toward them, not entirely focused, but aware. The air between them held something unspoken, something heavy. Serena did not linger. "Breakfast is at 8. Your schedule begins at 7. Punctuality is non-negotiable." And then she was gone. For a long moment, Lila simply stood there, unsure if she should speak. The ocean crashed softly against the cliff below, a slow, rhythmic echo that filled the stillness. Finally, she stepped closer and spoke, her voice gentle, unsure yet sincere. "Good morning, Dr. Rowan." His eyes shifted, if only slightly, acknowledging her. That was how they met, not with warmth, not with comfort, but with silence, grief, and a sea that never stopped moving. The first morning began before the sun had fully risen. The house felt different in the quiet, the hallways dim, the windows pale with the light of dawn still struggling to break through the fog rolling in from the sea. Lila woke in a small guest room near the back of the house, the blankets soft and unfamiliar, her body still caught between hunger and exhaustion. She dressed quickly and made her way to the kitchen, determined not to be late. The countertops were cold marble, the cabinets of pale wood that gleamed faintly in the muted light. A handwritten note sat on the counter, written in Serena's elegant, measured script. "Oatmeal, 1 spoon of honey, chamomile tea, cup facing the right hand, medication at 9. Do not forget." It wasn't instruction so much as command. Lila worked carefully, almost delicately. She heated the oatmeal, stirred the honey into the tea, arranged everything on a tray made of white porcelain with silver handles. The tray felt heavier than it should have, and she steadied her breathing before pushing open the door to Daniel's room. He was already awake. He always was. He sat angled slightly toward the window, his posture composed in a way that seemed practiced. His eyes tracked the slow movement of the sea below, though they did not show whether he found comfort in it or only resignation. Lila set the tray on the table near him, adjusting the placement as Serena had instructed. the teacup handle facing right, the napkin folded in half, the spoon placed parallel to the plate's edge. "Good morning," she said softly. His gaze shifted toward her, slow but intentional. "Morning," he replied, his voice low, steady, though touched with fatigue. She offered to help him eat, but he shook his head, lifting the spoon himself. His movements were slow, careful, but still held dignity. Lila stepped back just enough to give him space, though not far enough to seem absent. The quiet between them was gentle this morning, neither strained nor comfortable, but something neutral, open. After breakfast, she helped him to the sitting room, where a bookshelf lined an entire wall. He asked her to choose a book, his voice faint but clear. She selected a worn copy of a volume of poetry, the spine softened from years of touch. She read aloud, her voice uneven at first, but steadying as the words unfolded. Daniel listened with his eyes closed, not asleep, not distant, simply listening. The rhythm of the words seemed to fill the room, becoming something more than sound. It was only when the front door opened later in the afternoon that the atmosphere shifted. Serena Rowan returned home. Her heels echoed sharply against the floor, each step precise. Lila could smell her perfume before she entered the room. The scent crisp, expensive, and cool like winter air. Serena glanced at the two of them, and though her smile was slight, it felt practiced rather than warm. There was no greeting for Daniel, no inquiry, no acknowledgement of the moment she interrupted. Only, "Dinner will be at 6. Ensure he is presentable." Then she was gone, disappearing into another part of the house where her footsteps faded into silence. Dinner that night was quiet. Serena sat at the head of the table, poised as though photographed. Daniel ate slowly. Lila stayed nearby, not sitting, not fully participating, but existing in a quiet orbit around them. When Serena finally spoke to Daniel, it was only to comment on the weather. Not his comfort, not his day. Later that evening, Lila was cleaning the kitchen when she heard the laughter, soft, delicate, then suddenly loud, followed by the deeper voice of a man. Footsteps moved through the hall. Serena's laughter rose again, bright and sharp like glass. Lila froze. The sound felt wrong in this house, wrong near Daniel, who sat alone in his room, facing the ocean in silence. She returned to him quietly. He did not look at her when she entered, but his shoulders were tense, his jaw still. The laughter carried faintly down the hall. "You should sleep," he said finally, his voice surprisingly soft. Lila nodded, though she did not want to leave him alone. But she did, and the house returned to its strange quiet. Days passed like that. The rhythms became familiar. Breakfast at 8, reading by the window, walks when the weather permitted, silence when it did not. Serena was gone most mornings and did not return until evening, sometimes later. Her absence became a kind of presence itself, a shadow across every room. Lila learned the small ways Daniel communicated without words. The way his eyes lingered when he wanted the curtains opened. The faint shift of his hand when he was cold. The tightness of his jaw when pain returned, though he would never admit it. One afternoon, after several days of routine, Lila suggested they go outside. The air had lifted slightly, the gray light softening. Daniel agreed, and she wheeled him along the path leading down the slope toward the cliffs. The wind carried the scent of salt and pine. The ocean was loud today, waves crashing hard against the rocks below. They walked in silence for a long while, the sea speaking where neither of them could. They reached a clearing where the land dipped toward a low overlook. Lila turned the wheelchair slightly so Daniel could see the full stretch of the horizon. She stepped a few feet away to pick up a fallen branch that might have been a tripping hazard on the path. That was when she saw it. The wheelchair had moved, not by accident. Daniel's hands rested still in his lap, but the slope ahead of him was steep, and the cliff edge not far below. The chair was rolling. Slowly, deliberately. Her breath caught in her chest, time breaking apart into pieces. The world narrowed to the sound of wheels grinding over gravel, wind pressing against her ears, her heart slamming against her ribs. Daniel! She ran. The wheels gained speed. The chair drifted toward the descent. The cliff edge, where sea foam burst into the air below, drew closer. She reached him just in time. She threw her weight forward, grabbing the handles and pulling back with everything in her. The chair lurched, tipping sideways. They both fell, her knees slamming into the earth, her palms scraping against the stones. The ocean roared beneath them. Her breath shook. His did too. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel's voice broke, not controlled, not calm, but raw. That was the point. The wind carried the words away. Lila felt her chest tighten, grief and fear and anger mixing into something sharp. "You wanted to fall," she said, though it was not a question. He did not look at her. "I once lived with purpose, with skill, with hands that could save lives. When those hands stopped working, everything ended." Her own voice trembled. "You're still here. That has to matter." He finally met her eyes. There was no numbness there now, only pain. Old, quiet, devastating. "Someone once told me that," he whispered. "Someone kind." Lila didn't speak. She didn't need to. The sea roared, indifferent and vast. Slowly, gently, she helped him sit upright again. Neither of them said another word as she wheeled him back up the path toward the quiet house on the cliff. But something between them had changed. Not broken, not mended, something awakening, something that could not be undone. That night the rain returned, soft at first, then heavier, streaking down the tall glass windows and blurring the ocean into a shifting smear of silver and black. The house felt strangely hollow, the sound of distant laughter absent for once. Serena had not come home. Lila sat in the chair, near the window, while Daniel rested. Though he did not sleep, the silence between them had changed after the cliffside. It was no longer the silence of strangers. It was the silence of two people who had stood close to the edge of something irreversible. She stayed until his breathing steadied, then made her way quietly to her small room. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, the memory of him tilting toward the sea replaying again and again in her mind. And beneath that memory was something heavier, something she did not want to name yet. She greeted Daniel like a person greets a painting, something to be displayed, not loved. Lila began to notice things she had not seen before. Serena never touched her husband. Her wedding ring never shone as though it had been taken off often. Her gaze slid past him, always toward her phone, toward the mirror, toward the next destination. Daniel said nothing of it. He did not need to. One evening, when the sky was a blue-gray wall and thunder rumbled somewhere past the horizon, Serena returned with a man. Not just any man. Someone tall, confident, dressed in a tailored coat, smiling like he already belonged in the house. They didn't whisper. They didn't hide. Their laughter moved through the hallway like something unashamed and sharp. Lila froze behind the kitchen door as she heard Serena's voice laced with sweetness that was never present for her husband. They disappeared together into the guest room. The door closed. The click echoed. And Lila knew Daniel heard it too. She found him in his room, the curtains open to the storm and the ocean thrashing below. He sat with his back straight, but his hands shook, not with weakness, but with something more human and more painful. She said nothing. She simply walked to him and adjusted the blanket over his legs. His voice, when it came, was low and hollow. This house used to feel warm, before everything in it became evidence of a mistake. Lila knelt beside him, her hands resting lightly on the arm of the chair. You didn't deserve any of this. He let out a faint breath. Deserving has nothing to do with life. Only cost. Storms rolled through the next morning, the waves below crashing so loudly they sounded like they could tear the cliff away. Serena was gone again. The man had left only an hour after sunrise. The house felt emptied of everything but the sound of the sea and whatever pain lingered in Daniel's chest. Lila made soup, though Daniel ate little. She read to him, though he listened without looking at the page. When she asked if he wanted to rest, he shook his head, eyes fixed on something distant. "Come with me," he murmured, and she wheeled him to the hallway closet where a set of old photo albums were stored. They sat together by the window as he turned the pages. A younger Daniel stood in each picture, smiling, strong, steady hands, and sharp eyes. A white coat, a hospital hallway, then another picture, his wedding day, Serena smiling brilliantly at the camera, her hand resting lightly on his chest like she was staking a claim. Lila saw everything in that single photo she needed to understand. It had never been love. It had been hunger, not for him, but for what he represented. When they reached the final page, Daniel closed the book slowly. She was already seeing someone then. I found out later. The sky darkened, the sea rising dangerously as though responding to the truth spoken aloud. Lila asked quietly, "Then why stay?" His voice cracked in a way she had not yet heard. "Because I believed I could fix it. I believed marriage was something you endured. I believed I could make her love me." He turned his face toward her, and for the first time, he did not look like a man just surviving. He looked like a man waking up. "I was wrong." The storm lasted 3 days. On the 4th, Serena returned. She walked into the house as though nothing had ever been broken. She greeted Lila with a faint smile and Daniel with a cold kiss pressed to his forehead. But something in the house had shifted. The silence no longer belonged to her. Lila stood behind Daniel when Serena approached. Without speaking, Daniel lifted his hand, not to welcome her, but to stop her. She froze, caught off guard. The air tightened. The waves below hit the rocks with a deep, thunderous crash. Daniel spoke without raising his voice. "I want a divorce." The words did not echo. They sank. Serena laughed at first, a soft, brittle sound, but it died quickly. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice tightening. "You need me. You can't even take care of yourself." Daniel didn't flinch. "You stopped caring for me a long time ago. Lila is here because you hired her to avoid doing it yourself." Serena's face changed, a flash of something bitter and sharp. "And what are you now?" she asked. "What do you think you have left to offer anyone?" This time Daniel did not answer. Lila did. "He has more than you ever did." Serena's eyes cut toward her, a blade of ice. But before she could speak again, Daniel said her name in a tone that stopped her cold. "Leave. The lawyers will contact you." Serena stepped back, shaken not by force, but by the realization that she no longer held power here. She grabbed her keys, slammed the door hard enough to make the windows shudder, and disappeared into the rain. The house was quiet again. Not the lonely quiet from before. A different kind. A breathing kind. Lila stood behind Daniel's chair, her hand resting gently on the back of it. He closed his eyes, shoulders loosening, as though a weight years long had finally lifted. She looked at him, not as a patient, not as a burden, but as someone who had been broken and had finally chosen to stand again, even without his legs. He opened his eyes and looked at her, really looked at her, not through her, not past her. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The storm outside began to ease. The ocean was still restless, but no longer drowning anything. Something had ended. Something else had begun. They stayed by the window together, watching the horizon slowly, quietly become light. The storm eased, and the air smelled of wet stone and salt. The ocean rolled steadily, now no longer in rage, but in a slow, rhythmic breathing. Daniel remained by the window, his gaze tracing the horizon as though seeing it for the first time in years. Lila stood beside him, silent, understanding that this moment did not need words. Some silences were not empty. They held meaning, change, the quiet after a life has been cracked open and reshaped. He exhaled softly, closing his eyes for a moment. "I didn't think I would ever say those words," he murmured, voice fragile but steady. "And I didn't think I would survive saying them." Lila gently rested her hand on the back of his chair, not claiming space but offering presence. "You survived far worse," she said, her tone low, certain. "You survived being forgotten in your own home." Daniel's lips pressed together, not in pain this time, but in acknowledgement. The house felt different now. It no longer leaned toward Serena. Her perfume, her footsteps, the tension she carried like perfume. The rooms felt wider, the air easier. Lila opened the windows, letting the sea, wind, travel through the halls, carrying out everything old and stale. Curtains lifted and swayed, like something relieved. Sunlight, faint but real, found corners of the house that had been dim for far too long. Later that afternoon, Lila wheeled Daniel to the edge of the yard, overlooking the sea. The grass was damp from rain, and the clouds had begun to loosen, revealing soft breaks of pale light. A gull cried overhead, drifting on the wind. Daniel inhaled deeply, as though breathing in the world after years of living behind glass. "I used to come here alone," he said, "before the chair, before the silence. I used to stand at this edge and think about how small everything really is, how the ocean doesn't care about our successes or our failures. It just keeps moving." Lila sat in the grass beside him, hugging her knees. "Maybe that's the point," she said. "Life doesn't stop just because we do.